All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Alicia Columbell. I am here helping to moderate from our Social Responsibilities Roundtable for ALA, and I'm just handling helping with the chat and getting everything set. Just a couple of housekeeping things for today. Please be aware that we are recording these sessions, except for the film viewing of Breaking the News later on this afternoon. The recordings will be available for free in about a month on the SRRT website. After each session, the Zoom room that you are in is going to end. If you've registered for multiple afternoon of social justice sessions, you should have received a separate link for each of those. So don't worry if you don't have the link, or if you would like to register, you can hop on and still do that for some of the later afternoon sessions. You'll see some links over in the chat, but you should have received a link for each individual session. And you can click the link in there if there's another one you're interested in. Programs such as these are free for attendees, but they are a cost to ALA and SRRT. So if you're interested in supporting SRRT and our work, please consider donating at the link provided over on the side. It definitely helps us out to keep putting on programs like this. With that said, I'd like to introduce Abigail Phillips, if she is here, our speaker today, to get our program started for libraries, librarianship, and support for workers seeking accommodations, how to build more equitable, accessible, and inclusive practices for all. So thank you for being with us, Abigail.
I am here and I was going to warn that my cat may appear. Emmylou is here as well. So just go ahead and, go ahead and start my presentation. I'll take that as a yes. Let's see.
Absolutely.
Just using Google Slides, and sometimes that confuses me when sharing. Sorry for that. You think we would all be used to just sharing, but
Happens to the best of us, but we can all see your
yeah.
slides now.
Oh, wonderful. That's what I was going to ask. Okay. Let me hide everybody. Thank you so much for attending my talk. I have a had a co-presenter. I do have a co-collaborator that I've done most the research that this presentation is relying a good bit on, but he had a death recently in his family and is taking care of that and taking care of himself. So I'm the star of the show. Well, thank you. Again, this is libraries, librarianship, and support for workers seeking accommodations, how to build more equitable, accessible, and inclusive practices for all. And that's my Twitter handle. Apparently I'm still gonna be on it until the death of Twitter. This is so this is a smidge about me. I've worked in public libraries as a volunteer, as a teen, then a page library assistant, then a librarian back home in Southwest Georgia. So maybe it looks like minus, so negative 10 years, but it should be roundabouts. Then after working as a public librarian, I decided I wanted to get my PhD. So now I've been went to the PhD program, did a postdoc in a completely different field, but related. And 7 years this August as an assistant professor. So that is my tenure dossier is due very, very soon. And this was funnier when Dustin had his thing here. I will look at all your cat pictures. His was he enjoys long walks on beaches. I don't know if it kills right now, but this is Emulu, who is right next to me. An elegant lady. So I always love a little, where are we going in this? So the introduction, I already have that going. A little bit about the research project, just an overview. Some of our research, the 2 research questions we had that were the focus of our study. A little peek at some of the interview questions just to know what we asked librarians. Some of the, a little bit of the stories we heard. And then the 2 big portions, so building better workplaces, and some practical and implementable approaches. And then a few takeaways of note, just a little bit from the research, our research, and from just takeaways from my research in general about librarianship, supporting library workers, which is a lot of the work I do, is particularly on neurodiversity, mental health, disability, accessibility, and Q&A. And yeah, talk to me if you like. I keep forgetting that I have to click. Okay, our research project. It was a qualitative interview project. So we basically interviewed semi-structured interview questions with 12 librarians from across the United States who they all worked in public academic libraries. And they started their began their accommodations process right after COVID. So it's a very long form, a number of questions. So what's semi-structured, if you're familiar with research, you know, questions kind of come out from something a participant says. So they shared so much, which we are both very, it's a wonderful thing when people share it very openly with you. So we did what they were volunteered. Initially, we had a wide number of people who would like to participate, but we self-selected participants just to get a good demographic, just a good selection of participants to really give us a nice look of around the country of what was going on. So we didn't have a hypothesis. We did all of our coding just as the themes came up. But when in doubt, their experiences and voices are what matter. That's true in all of my research. I think it's critical to listen to librarians and library workers and hear what they are saying and experiencing. I work very hard to not, the research and practice divide, it does very much exist. So I work hard at understanding that. And we focused on the perspective of the interviewees. So these were librarians seeking accommodations. And we didn't speak with, they may have been managers or you didn't talk to their supervisors or managers. It was just the interviewees, these librarians, and their experience seeking accommodations. So two main questions. What experience have librarians and library workers encountered seeking accommodations in their workplaces? What can library administrators do to improve the accommodation request experiences of librarians and library workers? And just some of the questions we asked. I think it's interesting to know what people actually asked when you're looking at some surveys. What offices or positions on your campus handle accommodations? That was very intriguing. What was your general experience when seeking an accommodation or accommodations? Who was helpful on campus in your experience? Who was not helpful? The number of these answers were, the responses from our 12 participants were very intriguing. And supervisors, how did they help or hinder the process? And your colleagues, how did they help or hinder your process in seeking accommodations? So the stories we heard were very personal. With the research that I do, and it usually is pretty personal. People get emotional because they're talking about something so intimate and something that's about them and not work them, but them. Um, so, there was pauses for crying or just taking breaks, but they were very detailed. They knew exactly, remembered very clearly what had happened, the whole process of seeking or attempting to seek accommodations. Likewise, they remembered who did what, when, and where, because the experiences were not ideal for any of them, really. Managers and supervisors played an instrumental role in the experiences of the interviewees. It was a make or break, especially supervisors. There's were some fantastic supervisors who supported, and some that, or in some managers who just really did not help at all. We won't bury the lead. Primarily negative experiences. Even when it was successful, it was successful. They got their accommodation, but they went through um, what was a complex, dehumanizing. That word came up very repeatedly, and so much work and such a long process. But yet they still see opportunity and hope for change. So that's amazing to me with all they went through. So building more equitable, inclusive, and accessible workplaces. I believe it can really happen. I'm not an idealist or optimist, but I am a realist. But I still think it can happen. So just a bit of summary of the findings that relate to the talk today. Process burden. That is just the entirety of, from beginning of seeking accommodations to receiving accommodations or part of your accommodations process. There was so much you didn't, with students in higher ed, we have a disability resource center here at UWM, but for faculty, staff, just employees, there really isn't a space with it in academic libraries at the very least, where you know to go to seek accommodations, or that you can. As in the public library, I didn't know I could. I didn't even think about it, and I had no idea I could seek accommodations. So a lot of the burden is on the individual. A lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of talking back and forth, a lot of people, administration, and HR asking very intrusive questions is also what came about your disability, to prove you have a disability, which is not unlike with the student experience. So it just usually took from maybe 6 months was about the average. It could take a little bit longer for people to, put their the application for, or begin the process for accommodations, to receiving an accommodation or some kind of workaround. And the collegial dynamics of seeking accommodations, it's interest. It was interesting to me, not entirely surprising, that I live with I should have said this at the beginning. I I am disabled and I'm neurodivergent and I have a number of mental health issues. So that also it plays a role in the work that I do. But when you're disabled, and this also came up in a number of the interviews, you, you don't really want to tell people because you're afraid they're going to see you as lazy when you're seeking accommodations or trying to get out of work or trying to get a leg up. So you have colleagues who are supportive and maybe don't understand exactly what your disability is or what you're dealing with, but they know you're going through something and they do help. But some are with a couple of participants. Well, one participant was given an office because of she had chronic migraines that were set off by light and for a number of other reasons. And there was, gossip in the workplace about why did she get an office? Why did she get this privilege? And that wasn't uncommon in other ways. Why do they have a flexible schedule and I don't? Um, it, it was just interesting to me, how the dynamics with your co-workers can be, and it reveals a lot about just the nature of not only library work, but the ableist society we live in, ableist institutions we work in, the dilemma of management, again, make or break. Some people had informal accommodations where their supervisor is essentially informal. They could work, maybe they worked 4 days a week from home, 1 day a week in the office, or they had a flexible when they could come and go or different, but that all relied on that one supervisor. So if that supervisor left, that was as a whole, it started again. So that's why we felt it is very important to seek formal accommodations because you may have supervisors and managers who are wonderful and understand that this is going to help you do your work, but not always. And there is the label of the problem employee, which so much of this is ableism, but because especially in academia, and I didn't see this much in public libraries, if you share anything about yourself that a disability or you're going through depression or something, or any weakness, that it's like, what is it? Chum to the shark. They will go after that. It is a very political environment in academia and in libraries, definitely in public libraries. And somehow you become the problem, like because you are disabled or because you are seeking help in any form or fashion, you're an issue. There's more paperwork involved, meetings involved, everything, doctors, just a lot. And then there's seeking support when none exists. I've encountered this not only in this study, just in mental health in general within the United States. We get told a lot to reach out, talk, share. If you need help, get support, but the support is either pretty shitty or not great or doesn't exist. And so you have to work with what you have. And the reality of being disabled in an ableist world, the world is not built for us. The world is built for able-bodied, neurotypical people. Sometimes it's actively built against just the disabled being able to just function in society as just like anyone else. We also learned a couple, well, not learned, some of these words came up: masking, unmasking, passing, and camouflaging. And masking is when you just, I did for many years, pretend you wear a mask. You pretend everything's fine. You're doing okay. You're just here to work. You're a model employee. Nothing's wrong. You're not crying in the bathroom or crying at home but unmasking is terrifying. And sometimes when I did it, when you share or you let people know that this is going on in your life to some degree, uh, some people like me are very open, but some like may just give some of some of the details, like I do with my students. I encourage them to, if something's going on, you don't have to give me all the details. Just let me know. And passing is a term used a lot in the autistic and ADHD community, which I fell into. That means you pass as a normal or neurotypical. And camouflaging is very interesting. This is a newer one for me, that it means you change your behavior from make sure I'm getting this right. You change your appearance from place to place. You want to camouflage, blend in, not make any waves so nobody knows what's going on. And there's so much more that we're gonna not discuss here, but write about. Why do you keep doing that, Abby Phillips? Accessibility for all. Let me see where I am. Okay, not doing it. Disability, can I look at my notes? I need, I wanted to have the definition. Sorry, you're just gonna see the screen and I'm gonna read the definitions. So we're going with the ADA, American Disability Association. An individual with disability is defined as a person with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, person who has a history or record of such an impairment, a person who is perceived by others as having an impairment. And again, the ADA does not explicitly name all of the impairments. It does list some of them. And a lot of with disability relies on being receiving an official diagnosis from a medical professional. There are so many people, I myself self-diagnosed my ADHD years and years ago before I even attempted to talk to my psychiatrist about it. But it's a very medicalized view. And accessible means as a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability. Equally effective, equally integrated manner. And the person with a disability must be able to obtain information as fully and equally and independently as a person without a disability. So accessibility for all really that's what we're going to dive into. And that, yes, I just thought it was important to give the very clear definitions for those, because academics love definitions. So accessibility for all. What we found was when accessibility was provided for one person who was seeking accommodations, particularly in one case, the administration saw, well, why are we asking, like originally she would teach 4 instructional classes back to back at her university, but then because she had a serious medical condition, she needed to scale way back. And they questioned, like, why do we ask this of all our librarians? So really, when you provide accessibility for an individual, it's shown, there's been, especially in education for students, the accessibility is beneficial to everybody. But that's not to say there's no need for accommodations. That accommodations There's still a place, people still need them, but making the world, making your classroom, making the library as accessible as possible for everyone is key. And inclusions of those, yes, inclusions of those who need accommodations, it benefits everybody. It really does. But you really need to actually use the information that you gain from that accommodation seeking process, or from talking with librarians, talking with library workers, to make these inclusive and accessible workplaces. So there's huge need for the accommodations process to be changed. First, just having a place for an employee to go, either in public, school, academic, and then the support systems within library workplaces, just overall, like what support systems exist. Do they promote inclusivity, equity, and accessibility for all library workers? How did they do that? And the big question that I always wonder, because when I am on campus, I observe that, or anywhere, I think about it, that are these systems, are these support systems promoted? Are they well known? Are they shared? Are they actually useful for library workers? And probably where you work, there is a mental health and wellness week. We had ours in April, and it's good that they're acknowledging that is through our counseling center, but it really just scrapes the surface of mental health. It's like you're stressed over an exam, do yoga or petting a dog. Great. But it's also great to dig deeper into really supporting, like, what is the cause, what's going on, and how to provide support for librarians and library workers, and make sure they know about it, because that's the big thing I've seen. People, we just don't know where to go, who to go to. And that involves asking people, and sometimes it's not embarrassing, it's just very personal. Realistically, working with admin and HR, again, we are working with institutions. The library is, as you all know, an institution, and I talk a little bit about vocational awe in the next slide. The libraries are wonderful. They do great work. We do great work as librarians and library workers, or you all do, and I'm a theoretical librarian. But there are still institutions within either a university, a college, within some sort of a library system, a school system. There are larger structures at work. Managers really focus on protecting the processes to protect the library, rather than support worker accessibility. And I've been doing a lot of work in about library workers and about library workers and librarians. I make sure to be inclusive. Like, what are libraries and the administration doing to support, be accessible, inclusive for the people who are actually behind the desk? So much of the research is about serving patrons, serving communities, which is, of course, we need, but it's been relatively recently that more attention is drawn to those actually doing the work. As I said, formal versus informal accommodations, change in supervisors that can completely annihilate your accommodations. Change in perception, when you unmask, even if it's to a certain extent, some of our participants felt the need, or not felt the need, they felt like they had needed to share to everybody like what was going on, because they knew there was gossip and questioning of work ethic. Basically, this being lazy. It's in the disability community a lot. There's often, at least from my reading and my experience, there's a fear that you're being seen as lazy or not wanting to work. And consistently, our participants were doing extra over working so much to make up for that. And then there's favoritism, perception by colleagues, retaliation, being isolated from your colleagues might. It came up a couple of times where your colleagues in the library would just ice you out of social events, going to lunch, coffee. So ableism. HR was the primary source for librarians and library workers to go, or where they went, or were encouraged to go. You almost always described understaffed, underfunded, undertrained, or just outright hostile to the process. Uh, the the processes, the way you achieved an accommodation, usually were not described or not described as clear or accessible to the person who's seeking accessibility, and conversations were not transparent. A lot of it was invasive conversations where you had to explicitly say what was wrong with what's your disability, what was going on with you to prove you're disabled or prove you need an accommodation. So assumptions made, lesson learned. Still doing okay. Um, I include lifelong learning because that's just the slogan in the library world, library work, and being human. I thought about putting this at the beginning, but this seemed like a great place. Words have meaning, power, and often invoke an emotion, should be emotional response. Um, there are, within the disability community, there's there's ways people would like to be described as a person, person first, or disability, having their she's an autistic artist, or this artist who is autistic. Words have so much power, and I'm sure you all already know that. And so I use the words I use because that feels what makes sense to me and reflects my view of mental health, my own struggles with ADHD and depression. So I use words that reflect how I view disability. And but you may have there's a lot of discussion. So just to let you know, if my words at all offend, you can let me know. I'm open. But you'll see variations of language use. Mental health issues are not a quick fix or fixable or weakness or failure. Again, maybe you know that. I know that, but it's good to hear it. I found in my own life and at work, with mental illness in particular, it's okay if you maybe like a week or two you're not doing so great or you're taking off, but it's the lack of understanding that in a lot of cases for me, and it's lifelong. It's not going away. The depression, it's here, and that seems to confuse and frustrate those who are not experiencing that. Like it's not a quick fix. The experience of being disabled is not a monolith. There's so many different, I recommend so many different books about disability that speak to different experiences. It's not all the same for everybody because there's a range of disabilities, there's a range of how people engage in disability advocacy, how people talk about themselves and their disability or don't talk. What we need is one of my new favorite words, unlearning ableist language, which I've done trying to get rid of crazy as an adjective. For the past 3 years, I've worked, but that's ableist language, behaviors, and thinking, and it's hard because it's internalized. It's our culture's built on it, and unlearning ableist assumptions about accommodations and seeking accommodations. I've also seen this with instructors and faculty when students seek accommodations. In a survey that I reviewed, faculty and instructors viewed the students as trying to get a leg up or trying to get, which is your exact fear as somebody when you're seeking accommodations or when you have a disability. So that just makes you want to hide everything. Compassion and empathy and practice away from the desk. We give so much to our patrons, our students. It's important to have space for our colleagues and for ourselves, most importantly. Gotta take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else. And I know it is hard to ask for help or assistance, which is exactly what accommodations is, just a really, really long process of asking for help. I have struggled to ask for help, even more so when it's this intimate, because you can get rejected and shut down. I have been years ago when I was in the public library, especially when it is about who you are. I didn't know how to phrase this. Instead of work you or the percent who you present yourself as in the workplace. And this is the tough part, the honest needs for building these workplaces. We need a foundation of a workplace that has physical, mental, and social supports that well-being, and that is challenging. Physical and mental and social involve a lot of like being paid fairly, flexible work schedules, or just flexible figuring how work can work for an individual, and also work with the library. Child and caregiver care, insurance, the basic, just, and again, a lot of it's financial. The money to live every day, day to day, to be able to support yourself and not have, like some librarians and library workers I know who have extra jobs because libraries aren't paying them. That's just a lot of stress. And to build healthy workplaces, it just can't, I don't understand how it can happen without that solid solid basis. And assessment of policies, procedures related to the above. We have a lot of policies sometimes in libraries and procedures that we don't question, we just go with and go along. An analysis of that is a great stepping stone, and making sure, this is also critical, to include people, those people who are disabled, who are part of the community that you're wanting to support, and make sure to include, because it isn't rare. It's pretty common that people with disabilities. I read an author who talked about having she had a limb amputated, and she was talking about research being done on prosthetic limbs, like the changes and improvements and the future of it. But they didn't, within the research, they didn't include anyone with who didn't have a limb, and what they thought about it, what they would like to see was it's even helpful to them. And it's kind of astonishing to not ask the people you are specifically wanting to help. And understanding what self-care looks like for you. It's taken me a little time to get self-care, get away from the consumerist view, and more of the getting close. Getting close to the Audre Lorde view of self-care is a revolutionary practice to do good work in the world. Self-care, you need to take care of yourself. Rest, whatever it looks like for you. Mine is going for walks to the library. And what work-life balance means for you as well, because work is not going to figure it out for you. I've seen attempts made, but really you need to figure out on your own. I right now need to figure out what that really means. Physical environment in our research space, light, sound, setup of office, cubicle, shared area, or a note area. When I was in a small public library, it's not just for neurodiverse individuals. Everyone has reactions to that. Discussions of emotional labor, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma. Secondary trauma with archivists is not uncommon. I've learned so much more about it recently, and just working with different artifacts, working with images, and you have a response to that. And for me, it's so much focusing on the needs of library workers, not solely improvements, like accessibility improvements for patrons and communities. We need to do that, but we also need to focus on those of us who are doing the work, who are serving and working and wanting to make libraries better. Let's see how many. So a little bit, HR is not your friend. They exist for the institution. Keep that in mind. The library is not also an institution. Please advocate yourself. Your needs are valid. I have to be reminded about that by my psychiatrist and therapist. Your needs are valid. Find support systems within your workplace, but very, very important outside of the library. I learned that the hard way. Find people, something, anything, running, kayaking, walking, knitting groups, or people outside of your workplace. And if you are thinking of seeking accommodation, just an honest reflection, is it worth disclosing professionally, unmasking and accommodation seeking as risk assessment? Because we had a participant say it's just not worth it. It broke my heart, which is not a researchy term. It just felt awful to hear this person say it was not worth it for me to seek an accommodation. I should just keep masking. But how long can you mask? For 20 years, 30 years in a career? Man. So vocational all, that encompasses a lot of this. And visible disabilities are disabilities and are honestly challenging more institutionally. At least in my experience and the experience of our participants. People remember, of course, people remember if you help or hindered anything in general in life, but especially in the workplace. And get familiar with the policies, laws, processes within your workplace. Also with FMLA, the Family Medical and Leave Act, with ADHD. I think too much about my mental health. ADA compliances, just there's so many resources out there for within the disability community in particular, who are really advocates. You are not alone. I know we say that, but it is true. And the accommodation process, and just when you open up, and I know how hard I've done it, so I know it's incredibly hard. And you don't know how people respond, and sometimes I think it's worth it for me to share, because so maybe somebody else is like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. You don't have to prove you're disabled, or to say one participant said disabled enough. I'm like, what does that mean? There's a metric of disabledness. Um, and change don't come easily, but I do believe with all this, it's a lot and it's going to take a time. But change will come, as a song I adore. And since Dustin is here, I just included all my fun stuff. Um, this Andrew Gibson, they're one of my favorite poets. Build revolutions inside here, inside your own pounding heart. Then that alone could start the evolution of the entire human race. In a world of judgment, so much depends on the kindness of one friendly face. So build your compassion, build your grace. Oh, 12:45. That's pretty good. Questions, comments, thoughts, constructive feedback? And
Thank you.
also, sorry, I always forget this slide after the questions. This is all my contact info, my work email, my personal email. I'm still on Twitter, website. And if you want to look at my cat or just see me spouting about mental health and disability on Instagram, that is what I do. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking about supporting librarians and library workers, and making libraries a better place, or better places for us.
Thank you so much, Abigail. We do have a question in our Q&A feature, which I think you can see too, but I'm happy to
I
read it for
can.
everyone. So we have, hello, I would love suggestions on approaching trauma care in libraries. Recently, we were asked to rate our trauma on library incident reports when we filed one. Is that good practice? Our library has never had any kind of trauma care training, and we were caught off guard at a staff meeting with this, and it was very activating.
Yes. The I'm actually I this this over the past year I developed a course, a trauma informed librarianship course for my MLS program. So I have tons of resources I can share with you. Let me see. Can I see the questions? Where are they?
Yes, this one's you should be able to down the bottom.
Oh, now
Yes.
trauma. Honestly, when I was in the library, or at least my library, never had a trauma report, filed one. I'm the reason My instinct is to say that that is a very, very hard one. Um, trauma care training is fantastic. I've been working with some faculty within our school, in our college, our School of Social Welfare. So I have their expertise in trauma, because I don't have a background in social welfare. But trauma care training in library is happening more and more. I'm seeing more webinars about it. It desperately is needed. There's a book I can recommend. But it is very activating for me to sit down and write a report about an event that happened that traumatized me. Would be a triggering response. It is good. It's a great good that your supervisor or manager knows that this took place, or a colleague, or somebody at the circulation desk. And I would, instead of just internalizing it and keeping it, it'll be great. I know I spoke with a library out in Santa Barbara. She was a supervisor, and she also had a library incident report process, and it also followed up with taking time off, like taking time away from the desk, or taking time to step away into the staff room, or just taking time to go home, to leave the library. I in these situations, so much of it relies on your supervisor and manager and their understanding of trauma and their compassion. And ideally, they would be compassionate, like, please take the time you need because that was a traumatic experience. It's just so complicated with trauma to put it into report form. It seems at first, I believe some sort of training or we always say training or workshops or something, but ideally we would learn this in library school or learn this from our supervisors and managers and from the people we trust. I see that was a rambling answer. That said, I really don't know to rate. I missed that part. Rate trauma. The
Certainly an
rating,
interesting one.
yes, I'm more than happy, anonymous participant, to send you. I can send you my syllabus for my trauma-informed librarianship course, which isn't just LIS focused. It takes from social welfare, and they have so much about from people who actually work with in therapy with trauma on trauma. Um, there's there's a growth in this, and I think it needs to happen more and more. Especially, spoke recently with the Milwaukee Public Library, one of their directors, that I just wanted to go over the course with her to see the perspective especially from a public urban library, because I have not worked in one. And she was really excited that students would know coming in to libraries, like what you might experience and how to take care of yourself and how to not internalize it and take it home and burn out, because burnout is general. It was my default. Or
Well, thank you very much for that. So, whomever that was, if you wish to reach out, I know Abigail had sent her info. I'm sure you'll share it again. We do have a couple other questions as well. So the next one is, this is all very relatable and mirrors my experience as a permanently disabled librarian with invisible disabilities. My accommodation process was very long, took 2 years for my full process, 2 appeals, various doctors, therapists, a private lawyer, and I still have to go through the process annually for
yes,
accommodation renewal. Are required renewals for permanent disabilities common?
we found, yes, it was either every 6 months or every year. I don't, to me, that's appalling that you have to go through that whole process again, but it's common. Unfortunately, I don't, I, I don't know, again, why do you need to go to prove once again that you still need support? Um, I'm sorry. This is where a lot of my research is where it's, it's hard, but it's I think it's important to talk about this so we can build these wonderful workspaces, because we can improve and support each other.
Thank
So,
you.
so thank you for sharing your experience. That sounds dead on with our participants. It was lawyers back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and exhausting. So sorry you had to go through that.
So we also have in our Q&A, could you give examples of some supports that might be available in public libraries? This would be for library workers who are seeking accommodations.
It's a little trickier since we studied so much on we focused on, I want to look into public libraries and school libraries because I wonder what it's like from their viewpoint. Honestly, they're you will likely be sent to HR, and depending on your library, the size of your library, urban, suburban, rural. I worked in a rural library. Our HR person was also our accountant and did something else. So it was really hard, and everybody is so not intimate with just such small staff. Everybody knows everything, and I really don't. I don't have specific examples. If anybody has, I would love to hear them. I also, again, would like to study since I come from public libraries. I never heard any talk of accommodations. I heard about, I always forget it, the employee, um, Employee Protection Act. No, it's that the service that you employees have like a couple of therapy sessions available to them, free of charge through their employer, but it's like a specific number, or six maybe. And I know I'm feeling it's like this, I should do the academic. That's a wonderful question. Uh, I would love to talk more. I would love to learn more, and that's a push for me to look into public libraries because since we focus on academic libraries, but I imagine it's 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 going to be a bit of a struggle or it's a bit of a process depending on, again, what type of library you're in.
I will just toss in there too, for public libraries, a few people popped into the chat about EAP, or the Employee Assistance Program,
Thank
is
you.
also an additional resource for that, just to add that there. So going in order of the way our questions were received, our next one is, were there any specific accommodations discussed for circulation and reference desks that you would recommend a supervisor implement proactively to make staff spaces more accessible?
Not accommodations, specific accommodations for circulation and uh, good, if we're thinking about like accommodate accessible for everyone, I think having ideally an engaged and help not healthy workspace, a proactive workspace who has looked into it to make these spaces more accessible. That there weren't any specific accommodations that were suggested it was really more, we talked a lot about the process and dealing with that process, on an emotional and mental and dealing with work level. And Gina, your name sounds so familiar. Thank you for asking that question. Maybe Twitter, I don't know. Yes, this is where I should have my notepad for. I know. Yes, Gina, knew it. Thank you. And yeah, Gina, feel free to email me. I will talk more eloquently, or not. I'll try to speak like a human. Like the Q&As always throw me. I'm like, what? What do you expect? Yes, the employee assistance program, I'm glad it exists. It's just very limited in what it provides. Uh, so,
So
but
I was,
go ahead.
we had a secondary question in the chat about, it was going back to the question related to trauma-informed practices, but
Mhm.
how does one rate their trauma? Um, I'm not sure if that is also something you'd like to is, answer separately, but we're answering the questions as they've come in.
Honestly, never. I've not encountered someone asking. I've been asked to rate like in a therapy or psychiatry or medical situation where they give you that little chart of happy, sad faces. But rating, to me, trauma is trauma. It seems it's uncomfortable. I and there's research, but just me personally, uh, it's hard to rate trauma. It's like saying my trauma is more than your trauma, or I'm more traumatized than you are, and that's a weird, touchy place to go.
I think that was referring back to those staff forms that were asking the
Oh,
staff
the,
to rate
the
their
rate. Yeah, the rate threw me because it took me.
yeah.
I didn't read that at first, but I was like, rate
Yeah. So I
4
think
to 1
that's
to
also
10, or
we do have two. The next one is there elitism among the neurodivergent and disabled, such as I am more disabled than you and deserve accommodation more than you?
sitting with this as a disabled, a neurodivergent. It's possible. I haven't really encountered that myself on a when I'm doing the number of interviews with neurodiverse teens and librarians and library workers, and um, honestly, there's a lot of there's shame and feeling like you're broken and you're a failure and something's wrong with you. It's not accommodate. I don't even know if I would seek accommodations at my workplace. It's you just feel you feel so awful about yourself, and it's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just who you are. But elitism, I have not seen it. And if I mean, I can imagine that happening, but it would be a anomaly.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your question. That was interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
It's something to ponder,
It
definitely.
really, there's so much to ponder.
And we have one last question in our Q&A section here. Do you have any suggestions for resources that workers could send to their manager or supervisor to help them be supportive through the accommodations process for managers slash supervisors who want to be supportive but just don't understand?
Definitely. It's, would it possible for me to share a link or send, because I would love to give, I have a list of not like more academic books, more practitioner books. And there's a wonderful, I have a collection of zines that speak specifically about disability, and or just very easy to understand, approachable materials, and that you could share with your manager or supervisor to help them. Because I know people, if you it's easy. I mean, if you don't understand if you don't have that lived experience of being disabled, or um, being autistic, or having ADHD, or it's it's tricky. But there's so many wonderful resources, and actually engaging that conversation with your manager is a great starting point. That seems like you have a good relationship, or that you feel comfortable enough, because I did not, with my director, I did not.
It might also be someone who hopes to be an empathetic manager too. That
Yes, that's
could be it also.
great. I
And we had one last comment, and then we'll start tailing it off. But we had that invisible disabilities seem to have to fight more disbelief in the accommodations process. Um, so it's more of a statement, but
Yes,
it was in response to some of what you're talking about.
you 100%, Bridget. I could not agree more. Um, I when I did go to my library manager, and something was obviously wrong. And I told her I was depressed. She asked me, "What are you depressed about?" And it's people just don't, and that's why invisible disabilities is I still struggle with saying that because they are invisible to a certain extent. But and Jan, yes, that came up a lot in our conversations. Thank you for recommending that, Sarah. Job Accommodation Network and FMLA. A number of our participants took that, and then they had to take vacation, and they had to take sick leave. So you just take everything. Would I be able to send like a document with resources that answer the questions that I would like, or
Uh,
send SRRT?
I'm sure you could share that with us, and we can also see. But if folks would like to, if you'd like to pop your contact information again in the
Oh,
chat so
yes.
they have it one last time, and then I don't see why you could not share that with us, and we could see.
And just have a list in mind of like physical and um not electronic.
Further
Mine is the
resources are
best of
always a
me.
good thing.
I love a good resource. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Brett. I I can only speak so I can only be very vulnerable. It's the only way I know how to present because I felt so alone for so long. And yeah, hit me up on Twitter at Abigail Lee if you are still on that questionable. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to see a student. Well, not see, but student. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today,
Oh, every
Abigail.
time.
This was
Yes. Thank you so much.
a wonderful presentation. And so we are going to close this out. If anyone's registered for the next session, you should have the link to that to continue with our afternoon of social justice. So thank you again, and I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.